Hello to everyone that's joined in for this evening's webinar. We're going to get started in 5 minutes at the top of the hour. Hello, everybody. Welcome into this evening's webinar. Key conversation skills. Now, we think about conversation, and most of us, just about all of us, at some point communicate, connect with other people. And there are sometimes we think we're having a conversation, or somebody thinks they're having a conversation with us. And really, maybe what it is somebody's just unloading, or you're unloading. Key conversation skills, the idea around this is to truly have what we might call a win-win situation of people connecting with other people. Now, there are some times to where the conversations may be a little bit imbalanced. We may be listening a lot more, we may be talking a lot more. The goal for conversation skills and why they're so important is because not only face to face, person to person, but because we also connect so much online, whether it's through texting, emailing, DMs, video chat, things like this, a Zoom webinar, anything like that, having a back and forth, productive, positive, exciting conversation with people is very important. And I'm going to go through a bunch of those skills this evening. The great thing about all of these skills that we're going to talk about this evening is they could work individually. You could pick one of the things we're going to discuss this evening and work at it, build skill around it, and elevate your conversation skills. They also work well collectively and together. And the more of these skills you can put together, the more not only of a dynamic conversationalist you'll notice that the people wanting to connect with you is going to increase either in quantity or increase in quality. You'll have better, maybe deeper conversations with people. That's why, especially for all of you, all of the wonderful talent out there, whether you're in acting, modeling, music, anything like that, whatever we do here in the entertainment industry, it is key at some point to have conversational skills. Now, an additional piece for those of you that may be on or off camera, whether it's acting or you read through lines, you have scripts, that sort of thing. Actually, knowing these conversation skills would help you even in a scripted manner because you could take some of these things into consideration when practicing your craft. So many, many benefits to them. Now, there are many of you in the room tonight that may have been in rooms with me before. For those of you that are coming back, and if you've been in rooms with me before, welcome back. I'm always glad to have you. It's been a wonderful ride, and thank you to 99 Neon Agency for bringing me in and allowing me to share all of these different tips, tricks, skills, things that build us as human beings, as professionals, as friends, family members. I'm grateful for the opportunity. For those of you who are new to me, if this is your first time in the room with me, welcome. My name is Rob Hinds, and the name of my company is Raise Your Lid Consulting. And I teach and inspire people to elevate and build their communication skills, their conflict resolution skills, all the human skills that we actually need, and things that AI won't be able to do for us while we exist, especially all of us in the entertainment industry. We need to connect with others some way, somehow. And what better way to do it than through skill building? So I will give all of my information, my contact information at the end of this. If you ever feel like reaching out, you have questions, or you just want to follow on my social channels, whatever you would like to do, I'll provide all of that after you. But welcome to all new and people who have existed with me before. As far as questions this evening, I'll ask you to put all of your questions into the Q&A or the chat. And if you're referring to a specific part of the presentation that you'd like more information on, do me a favor and be very, very clear with the question you're asking. If you are going to make a statement or if you do just have something to say, that's fine. However, I will only be reading the questions on the air tonight in order for everybody to benefit from the response. But all of your commentary, feedback, all of that is very welcome. I'll do that at the very end of the presentation. So as you come up with your questions, pop them into the Q&A or the chat, and we'll make sure we have enough time at the end to get to everybody's questions. All right. Well, as far as the topics of focus tonight, I know this looks like a pretty big list. We're going to go through each one of these in just a little bit of detail, just enough detail that you could walk away and not only be able to think and be more intentional about these things, but also have something very quick that you could apply right away. For those of you that have been in rooms with me before, you know within this hour or less with each other, I do my best to give very simple but very actionable very actionable items that you could walk away and apply immediately. Now, there may be some of these things on the list that you do very well. If it's a strength of yours, I strongly encourage you to build on it. Not only stay afloat with it, but actually build on it if it's a strength. If it's something you really need help with, take the information we're going to go through this evening and work on it step by step, little by little. Um, don't expect perfection, just progress. Just make progress, especially if it's something that you're either not skilled at or not comfortable with. Just take action, make a little bit of progress, gain small wins, and build momentum from there. If any of these things or all of these things are things you really want to work on, um, you can do something like look up online classes, more online classes. You could hire somebody like me, a coach or a consultant to help you with those things. But all of these are very valuable and very viable when it comes to conversation with each other, whether we're one-to-one individually, whether we're in groups, and even you could take some of these conversational skills and think about them in the realm when you're texting somebody or DMing somebody or emailing somebody. So a lot of these conversation skills could even go into the text or the written world. The first one we're going to talk about this evening is the massive importance of purposeful and meaningful questions. Many times when we're in conversations with people, we sometimes we ask questions to be nice. Sometimes we ask questions because we feel like it should be the question we ask. Now, if we're familiar with somebody, we could probably get a little bit deeper and get right into more deeper, meaningful questions. When you're newer to somebody or newer to a group, it's really important to move past surface questions very quickly. And what I'm talking about this evening are questions of genuine curiosity. And when I mean genuine curiosity, I'm talking about what do you really want to know? What do you really want to learn? What do you really want to find out? Or what do you really want to communicate in that conversation? So when you have questions of genuine curiosity, you're really doing a couple things here. First of all, you want to make sure when you're asking questions that you're respecting the boundaries of other people. What I mean by that is when you ask questions out of curiosity, and let's say you have a really long-term relationship or rapport with this person, you know that you could go a little bit deeper, a little bit heavier, maybe even get a little more personal depending on what you want to ask. When you're talking to somebody that may not be comfortable or somebody that you've just met, you want to make sure that you really pay attention to that person's cues, which actually in my last presentation for 9-9 we talked about identifying cues from people. We want to make sure that we respect their boundaries when we're asking questions. As far as purposeful questions, one of the keys to them is asking what you really want to or need to know. You know, I'll give an example of a general question. A general question would be like, how's your day today? Which, great question, bit of an icebreaker. a little bit more on the general, very, very safe. However, if there's something you really want to know, you would want to be a little more specific in that question. So, and instead of how was your day today, how did things go at your new recording studio? How did things go on set? How did things go at your photo shoot? Now you could be a little bit more specific. And those, by the more purposeful and meaningful we could be with our questions, the more people also gravitate to us because that shows that we feel we really care. The more general or surface level of our questions, it kind of sounds like that. I'm just asking to be nice type of thing. Purposeful, meaningful questions, a great way to build really, really solid conversation skills. Ooh, this one is number two on the list. And of all the human skills that are out there, real listening, true, mindful, intentional listening is actually one of the hardest human skills to build. And it's the skill within ourselves that we misjudge. Most of us think we're better listeners than we actually are. So when it comes to mindful listening, the whole idea here, everybody, is listen to learn, listen to understand, listen to connect. That's the beginning of mindful, or some people even call it active listening. Whether it's mindful or active listening, when you're really listening to learn, understand, and connect a little bit deeper, that's when people start to notice that you're taking interest in them. I'll throw out a question, all of you. I'm sure there are many of you that have talked to somebody and then they might ask a follow-up question that you just answered or you just told them about. You could tell they're not listening. Maybe their focus is off. Maybe, you could tell that they want to talk to you, so they're just waiting for their turn. And all of those things we're actually going to talk about as we move forward in this presentation with conversation skills. Mindful listening is not waiting for your turn to speak, and it's also not thinking or formulating your response while you're listening. For any of you in the room who know what real mindfulness is being in the moment and being fully engrossed in it. So when you're thinking about what you're going to say next, or when you're formulating a response, or you butt in and you blurt out, "Oh yeah, I already knew that." Here's the deal. There's things that your brain can't do at one time, and one of those things is talk and listen. You can't do both at the same time. So when you're listening, I strongly encourage all of you to be mindfully listening. And that way, not only will people notice that you are listening and you care, they'll connect with you better and deeper and quicker. For some of us in the room, maybe many of us, things like removing judgment, not being judgmental is very difficult. And I'm not necessarily talking about judgmental in a negative way. Judgmental can be positive or optimistic. Judgmental can be negative or pessimistic. When we're talking about judgment here, we're making some sort of assessment. Or even if we think we know all the information and we don't, now we're making an assumption, which normally making assumptions aren't a good thing unless you have such a solid history with a conversation, with a subject matter, with a person that, it's pretty safe to say that you know what's coming. However, removing judgment, we want to be able to absorb information for the purpose of understanding or learning, not the purpose of assessing or judging. We all know when we feel like somebody's in judgment and on us. We also know when we're in judgment of others, even if we try to hide it. Again, referring back to my last program here with 99 The N Agency, we talked about recognizing cues in people. And there's verbal and nonverbal, facial expressions, body language, all those things. You can tell. So when it comes to judgment, if you can do your best to remove judgment, and not to say that you couldn't judge later or make an assessment later. However, while you're in conversation, do your best to just understand and listen the best you can. Now you'll notice as we're moving through, a lot of these subsections are tying together, and they will. They work individually or collectively. And this is where we actually get into the cues. And I say here, be observant. Look for the cues that would either enhance your interaction or cues that would detract from the interaction. If somebody's really nervous and fidgeting, if they're not clear in their speech, if if you feel like you've got certain emotions welling up and you're not able to get out the words that you can. So by being observant of people, especially in conversation, when you look for those cues, you can adjust accordingly and make for a more comfortable, a better and a deeper conversation. Sometimes even if it's not a conversation that you want to have, if it's a difficult conversation or some sort of conflict or something going on that may be out of your control, we want to make sure that just by being observant, that's the part that where mindfulness comes back into play, and we're aware of the things that are going on around us, people's behaviors, their mannerisms, all those things. Being observant is very important when it comes to building your conversation skills. This one sounds really simple, and it is simple. It may not be easy for some people. Sometimes a moment in silence is okay. There are times in conversation where, and maybe you're one of those people. I used to be one of those people to where if there was any time of silence in any type of conversation, whether it was within a group or one to one individually, a lot of people get nervous with silence. And sometimes it's okay. Now, here's the real beauty and the key of this. If you could be okay with silent moments in conversation with other people, it's actually an example of power. It's actually an example of confidence. If you could just pause slightly during a conversation, it actually does wonders. And one of the things it does, it relieves the pressure from all the people in the conversation. I said here, pausing to let one another think or process, it's actually a healthy thing. Yes, it is very uncomfortable. It's a healthy thing. So sometimes silence, just a quick pause, and here's where the beauty really comes in. When you start to become comfortable with silence and somebody says something that might ring with you and you pause and even your facial expression shows that, wow, that was impactful or interesting, and you sit there for a second and they're watching you sit there for a second, and then you say something like, wow, what you said was just really impactful, and here's what I liked about it. And then you could pause again in that little bit of silence. It actually helps build momentum in conversations. Now, just like all of these other things that we're talking about this evening, there's skills to build. Silence is kind of one of those odd skills to build, but once you build it and you get good at it, you'll be amazed at how much more interested people become in you because of that. Very, very fun skill to learn, which leads us to the next. Be interested and be interesting. Here's where here's where conversations become challenging. You know, it's the idea isn't to have a perfectly balanced, okay, you're going to talk this much, I'm going to talk this much. Asking for balance, it's not realistic, and it's actually a little bit stressful to talk about balance. However, when you're able to monitor your talking versus your listening ratio, you're able to gauge in these conversations. Maybe you're talking to somebody that might be a little bit shy or introverted or a little bit more on the quiet side. And you might say, okay, you know what? Maybe by me talking a little bit more, that may help in the situation, being conscious of the other person. Or you might think, okay, this person really has a lot to say. They're on a roll. They have a lot to get off their chest. Maybe I'm just going to back off and just do a little more listening than I normally would. So those harmonies within the ratio of talking to listening may adjust a little bit. However, if you could really truly be interested in people, they'll notice. And if you could be interesting yourself. Now, I'm not saying you have to be the class clown or, the comic. You don't have, I'm not saying to go to extremes on any of this. Definitely be yourself. Do your best to be the most interesting part of yourself that you can be. I'm sure all of you in the room have been in conversations before to where the person is really much of a Debbie Downer, or it's a lot of negative talk, or everything you talk about, they talk about why you can't do it or why they can't do it. And a lot of conversations can be absolutely draining. And later on, we're going to talk about how to exit those conversations. So don't worry about that just yet. However, those people also aren't interesting. So even if things in your life aren't the greatest or you don't have a lot to deliver in a conversation, you could still be interesting to a certain extent. And this is where you would again adjust that talking to listening ratio. Maybe you just do more listening and more asking of questions if you feel like you can't be as interesting in a specific conversation. There's no pressure for you to be interesting. However, the more interesting you could be, the better it is for the conversation and the connection with people. This is a difficult skill, especially for people. If any of you have been through my communication or disc workshop, or anybody of you have taken any personality or communication assessments, anything like that, there's a personality of influential people, and normally they like to do all the talking. They like the spotlight on them. Many of us in the entertainment industry are of that influencing mentality. What happens is a lot of times people that are in the influencing category are also the most distractible. If you're a really high energy person, you're constantly looking around, you're constantly panning the room. You need to look at your watch, you need to check your phone every 2 seconds. Whatever distractions you are putting out there, just know that for each distraction, even if it's a small, quick one, it diminishes from the quality of the conversation. Tonight, we're talking about conversation skills. The more you could stay focused, the higher probability you're going to have a more productive, successful, interesting conversation, better connection with people. The more you're distracted, that other person, they start to get the feeling that you're not caring about them or you're not paying attention to them, which diminishes their ability to be more interested, more interesting. It ends up being a bad tennis match. Staying focused, avoiding distractions, very, very important for many of us in the room. Probably not easy to do. So, my goal for all of you is just start by minimizing distractions. It's not that we're never going to be distracted, it's not that something's never going to interrupt us. It's not extreme. It's just be aware of the distractions that you have and even the distractions of others. In conversation, it's actually okay to let somebody know that you feel that they're being distracted. It's okay. As long as your approach is appropriate, it's okay to say those things. This could be very, for some people, it might be the way they are. It may be the way their personality is. For some people, this might be difficult. Being respectful of people's thoughts and their perspectives, especially in today's world. All of you see all of this information coming our way. The information we fed is specialized for what we look up, what we Google, what we search, and everything is fed to us in a certain way. And what this does is it creates separation from human connection. Now, when we're in conversations with people, we talked earlier about removing judgment. This goes along with that. Be respectful of people's thoughts and perspectives. It doesn't mean that you need to agree with them. It doesn't mean that you need to agree with their thought or their perspective or their idea or the information they're giving you. All this is recommending you do is be respectful of it. When you can really look at different perspectives in an open-minded way, it opens you up for better connection with people, which leads to better conversations. So showing respect, not asking you to agree, not asking you to go along, just asking you to be respectful of their thoughts and perspectives. For some people, they use it as a guard or a vice or a shield or because they're uncomfortable. Humor is a very, very interesting thing. Most of us think we're funny. Many of us are funny. However, sometimes our way of delivering, our way of communicating may not be appropriate for the situation, the conversation, or the people involved. And this is where I say not only be mindful, which is aware of your humor, also be appropriate with your humor. For example, if you happen to be at a wedding, you know, you may not want to openly joke about the groom's three unsuccessful weddings previously. Now, of course, depending on who you're around, those sort of things, humor may be appropriate. However, there are some people that really have a hard time regulating what comes out of them. And there are many times, probably a lot of you in the room, that have said at some point, wow, I really didn't mean to say it that way. Or no, you know what? I don't think that was a good joke. Or that was the right time for joke. We do hear the joke too soon. Think about something like that when you're using humor in conversation. Is it mindful and is it appropriate? Those are really good things to think about. Appropriately expanding on your thoughts. Now, this is where you're really going to have to pay attention in your conversations. You know, there are some of us are storytellers. And actually, many of us in the entertainment industry, we're storytellers. If you're a songwriter, you're probably some sort of storyteller. If you're an actor, you're a storyteller. So if you're a model, you're a storyteller. Whatever it is, the entertainment industry is full of storytellers. Now, the way we expand on them or the way we even constrict them is very important for conversation. Sometimes more detail is necessary. Sometimes less detail is necessary. What we want to do is we want to make sure that we take context into into consideration. And I'll give an example. Let's say I meet you for the first time. I don't know you, you don't know me. We're making conversation, and as we move along, we start to get a little bit personal. I might ask, do you have any children? Do you have a partner? Anything like that. When we talk about context and you may be newer to somebody in a conversation, it's probably not good to tell them about all the trauma you went through as a child or um, you know maybe your background, if you happen to have had or have an addiction, anything like that, like sharing really, really deep things too soon. That's when you want to not expand so much on your thoughts. Now, if you're with a group or you're talking to people and things are getting really deep, now you can be more expansive. You could tell longer stories. It's so funny that normally when I hear people say, well, to make a long story short, they're normally saying that after they told me a really long story. And maybe many of you in the room can attest to that. And you've been through that or you've said that before. I know I have. I've gone on a tear sometimes, and then I've said, okay, long story short, but too late. I already made the story too long. So appropriately expanding on your thoughts is a really good conversation skill to be aware of and to build. When we talked about respect for other people's thoughts, feelings, perspectives, we also talked about non-judgment. We talked about too soon. Um, Bombardment is another thing. And this is specifically getting too deep too soon. Maybe we talked about purposeful questions. Sometimes it's asking way too many questions. Or if you happen to read in somebody, if you read in somebody that they're really high energy and they like to move fast, then you could do a little more bombarding with, constant back and forth, maybe a little bit high pace, high energy. However, if you notice somebody's on the lower end of energy or just a little more mellow, you may want to slow it down and maybe not bombard them with so many things or so many questions, bombard them with so much information. There's an old saying, some people just want to know the time. They don't want to know how to build a clock. So, sometimes giving people too much information, sometimes like we shared in the previous section, getting too deep too soon, those are some of the things that could distract from a good conversation. And then we finally get to this, recognizing when the conversation is over. Now, I know I could be pretty sure that all of us in the room have been in a conversation, maybe multiple times a week, maybe even today, where you're thinking, man, when is this thing going to end? I would really like to walk away. Or you might have been the person on the other end that was dragging on the conversation longer and longer and longer. Now, I come from an Italian family and Italian background. Ending conversations was very, very difficult for my family. Very, very difficult. So I actually had to learn the skill of ending conversations. And the more I learned about communication and started to teach it and that sort of thing, you can actually build a really, really good skill around recognizing when the conversation is over. And approach is very important. You can respectfully and kindly say to somebody, you know what? This has been a really great conversation. I enjoyed meeting you. I look forward to seeing you again, if that's the truth. Or I look forward to connecting with you at some point. Or you can just say, it was really nice talking to you. I'm going to go now. So, recognizing when the conversation is over, if you're a talker, it's difficult. Um, if you're somebody who's really trying to build these skills, it's something you would need to be consciously aware of. Many times, it's actually a good thing. Now, if you're in the middle of a conversation with somebody and you just decide, you know what, I don't like this conversation. I don't like them. I want this over with. You could still respectfully and kindly exit the conversation. But recognizing when a conversation is over, it's actually a skill that many people need to build. On the other end of it, it's if you do recognize when the conversation is over, do you have the courage and the skills to end it? Very simply. All right. So I'm not asking you to answer this question, but think about it yourself. Which of these things, which one of these things, or which multiples of these things really stood out to you? Which of these things do you believe you're very skilled at? Which of these things do you really want to or know you need to build skill in? That's why it's wonderful that all 12 of those things we talked about this evening, they could work individually and very well collectively. So we started out with purposeful questions. Ask what you really want to know. Then we went to mindful listening, listening to learn and understand, not waiting for your turn to respond. Removing judgment, doing your best not to make an assessment or a judgment, just continue to understand. And maybe that judgment or maybe that assessment would come later, but while in conversation, absorbing information for what it is. Being observant. Are you aware of the cues? Verbal, nonverbal, behavioral. Those are a lot of the cues that just by being observant of those, we could actually make our conversations better or worse, depending on our level of awareness of observation. Pausing is okay. Silence, it can be a very powerful and a beautiful thing if you could start to master it little by little. Be interested in other people and be interesting. Be interesting to other people. This isn't about changing who you are. It's just about having the respect enough for others to show interest and to show that you're somebody that's a great person to have a conversation with. Keep focus, minimize, and even eliminate distractions as much as possible. Be respectful of people's thoughts and people's perspectives. Even if you don't agree, even if you have a different perspective, that's great. That's what you could share within your conversation. Being respectful of others is something really, and we've seen this in society. This is something that has really gone to the wayside. And the more we could do this now with each other, we're actually going to gain stronger connection with others because it's not being done that much anymore. Be mindful and be appropriate with your humor. Know your situation, know your people. If you're unsure, it's it's a better idea to be a little more subtle in your humor until you really get to know people and then maybe you could open up a little bit. It's when humor is either really people use it as an uncomfortable shield or they use it as a defense mechanism, they use it as an attack mechanism, a passive aggressive mechanism. That's when humor really turns itself on its head. Appropriately expand your thoughts. How much information should you give? How much detail should you give? Managing your talking and listening ratio. Avoid bombardment. Just constantly hammering people with constant questions, boom, 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 or constant information, boom, 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 boom. Avoid bombardment. Try to figure out what the pace of the conversation is and keep it around that pace if it's comfortable. Sometimes the pace needs to be increased, sometimes the pace needs to be decreased. But when it comes to just flat out bombarding people, now you're not being conscious or aware of others. And then lastly, it was recognize when the conversation is over. You could definitely find a clear, direct, and kind way of moving on from a conversation. It's okay. And there is a good chance that everybody will be relieved because many times there might be multiple people in a conversation and they're all sitting around thinking, when is this thing going to be over? But nobody ends it. So you can be that person. All right. I'm going to go through the questions that people have asked. So I'm going to look through the chat really quickly. While I do, if you scan this QR code, this is my gift to you for being with me this evening. And the majority of the programs that I do for all of you at 99 Neon Agency and everywhere else, I like to give a little resource of what we discussed. So I've created a little outline of what we talked about this evening. So you could scan the QR code, save it into your device, anything like that. It's all yours. You're more than welcome to it. So I'll leave that up for a moment before I bring up my contact information. And let's see if we have anything in the Q&A or the chat. Okay. Some very nice commentary. Hello to all of you. Thank you for being with us. Okay. Looks like the first question came from Kai. Kai, welcome back. I love having you in the rooms with me. You're a constant. I'm grateful for you coming back. And you normally ask some pretty good questions. So let's see what Kai has to ask tonight. How can you apply this to an extremely inappropriately uncomfortable conversation, like a sexual conversation that you don't want to be a part of, but you get cornered into it? Well, Kai, the answer to your question was the very last topic we talked about. Clearly, kindly, directly exiting the conversation. Clearly saying, you know what? I understand that this is a topic of conversation. It's not something I'm looking to delve into. I'm going to take off. Have a good evening. Ending it that way. So, you know, the only way you get cornered into a conversation is when you don't speak up for yourself. By speaking up for yourself in an appropriate way, you can exit yourself from the conversation or you could make a suggestion. You know what? I know this is the topic that we're on. Is it possible that we change it? Is it possible that we talk about something else? Or this conversation is making me uncomfortable, or this is a conversation I'm not looking to have. Can we change the subject? So there you go, Kai. There's a few answers to it. Okay. Okay, Mackie, thank you for joining us this evening. Let's see. Mackie asks, do you find Donald Trump a good communicator? In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. There, with all of us, there are skills, and part of being a communicator is a listener. I do believe that he has very good listening skills, especially even if we don't like the way he responds. The way he responds showed that he actually listened partially to a question. So, do I find Donald Trump a good communicator? He has some skills, and then he has some detriments in his communication. I'll leave it at that. Okay, Kai, you have another question. How can you apply this when you genuinely want to get to know somebody and they're giving you the driest pushback and the conversation is one-sided? Ooh, Kai, that's a good question. Kai, I would go back to the purposeful questions that we talked about much earlier in the presentation. And if you want to get to know somebody and they're giving you driest pushback or the conversation is one-sided, one of the things you could do is you could point that out to them and say, I'm getting the feeling that you might not want to get deeper in the conversation. Is that accurate or correct? And if they say yes, then you could either end the conversation or keep the conversation on a surface level. If they say no, then you say, okay, maybe you start asking them some questions in a different way to get a different response from them. So there you go, Kai. Okay. Okay, Kai has another question. What if one person talked the whole conversation and as soon as you want to speak, the conversation is over? Well, this is another great example of you stepping in. Maybe this is an indication for you to step in earlier So you could let them know that you want to be part of the conversation. Now, if you're just being a kind or nice, active listener and you have nothing to say, that's fine. If you want to speak, if you want to do something, there are some times where you're going to have to appropriately interrupt and say, you know what, I'm gonna break your role here. There's actually something I really want to say, and then speak your piece. Great question, Kai. All right, next question is from Eric. Eric, thank you for joining us this evening. Um, Eric asked, "What's a great way to end a conversation?" Well, at the end, maybe you asked this a little bit earlier. At the end of this presentation, I gave about probably 6 or 7 examples, and I'll go through a couple of them again. Great way to end the conversation. One of them might be, you know what? I've really enjoyed talking with you or talking with all of you. I'm going to take off for the evening. Have a great night. Very, very simple. That's a simple way to end a conversation. Another way is to say, you know what? I'm actually running short on time. I'm going to need to end this conversation, but I'd love to connect with you again at a certain point and continue this. Now, if only if that's the truth, of course. If you want to continue the conversation, you could end the conversation and lead into that and say, this was great. For now, it's over. I'd like to rekindle this conversation down the road. Let's set up a coffee and then do that. So, Eric, I hope those were good examples for you. Okay, let's see. Next, Robert. And Robert, thank you for being back in the room. I know you've been in several rooms with me. Always good to have you. Robert asks, if we address the end of a meaningful conversation, is it a great way to carry forward in the future with respect and confirmed understanding? Absolutely. Actually, Robert, that's a really good thing to do. One thing that draws you closer to people is either remembering things about them or remembering things you've discussed. So, Robert, in the context of yours, you end a meaningful conversation and you want to carry it forward in the future. When you do see them in the future and say, you know what, I was thinking a lot about our last conversation and I would love to continue it. Robert, that's a phenomenal mindset and a great skill to have. Thank you for that. Okay. Julie, Julie, I've had you in some rooms before. Welcome back. So glad to have you again. Julie asks, how should you handle a conversation where you do not have a definite answer to the questions? Great question, Julie. The answer to that question is be okay with not having the answers and letting them know that. Say, you know what, that's a really good question. At this moment, I actually don't have a definitive answer for you. I don't have a straight answer for you, but I will think about it. So that's a way, that's probably the best and most honest way to answer it. Some people will say make something up. I wouldn't encourage anybody to lie to anybody else or just make something up for the sake of making it up. Be straightforward and honest and say, you know what, that's a great question. I actually don't have an answer to it. Thank you for that, Julie. Okay. This next question is from Joe. Hi, Joe. Thank you for joining us this evening. Joe asks, well, it looks like a little bit of a lengthy thing, so let's see what we've got here. Hello. I do have some difficulty with groups when I cannot their follow up their conversation when I get lost in the middle of it. Because I have a hearing disability, yes, sir, sometimes I'm feeling left out and nervous, not knowing what to say to answer their messages or questions or anything. This is really frustrating. How do you cope with hearing disability? Joe, this is a great question. And this question not only goes for the hearing impaired, this also goes for people who have trouble with attention deficit. So here's what I would say, Joe. If you're in a conversation and you're not following along, I would encourage you to interject and say, please understand, I'm hard of hearing. I'm doing my best to stay in this conversation, and then have a request for them. Ask them to either slow down their pace or say, you know what, I may ask you to repeat something. I'm just letting you know this is why. Just giving them the straight context of why you're having challenges in those conversations. And most people will be gracious and do what you ask them to do. So I would just be very upfront about it and let people know what the situation is, and hopefully they would adjust their pace, or if they need to talk into one ear versus the other, whatever those adjustments need to be, let people know what that is, and most times they'll oblige. Great question. Okay. Okay, Jacob. Jacob, welcome this evening. Thank you for joining us. Jacob asks, I'm struggling with two relationships with the same type of woman. Is it safe to speak about matters of the heart when you're in the middle of a come clean moment? Jacob, for this, I would say, I don't know the whole story and the whole context, but based on your question here, it is good to be honest with people. It's not necessary to be vulnerable with people. Vulnerability is for people who have earned your trust. So if you feel in these relationships that you want to speak about matters of the heart, you said in the middle of a come clean moment. I don't know if that's admitting something. I don't know what that actually means from you. But when it comes to speaking matters of the heart, this is where you could adjust the amount of information you give. However, speaking from the heart is normally a good thing. Now, if people are using that against you and are being narcissistic and that sort of thing, you would definitely tone that down or eliminate it from your conversation. Speaking from the heart normally is a good idea. The come clean moment, if you meant that's admitting something to somebody, or having a difficult conversation with somebody, speak truthfully. The truth speaks for itself. All the other stuff, I feel like I have to make something up or fake it to make it, all that nonsense, those never do you any good. I hope that helped. Okay, let's see next. Sherry Lynn. Hi, Sherry Lynn. Welcome. Glad to have you this evening. Sherry Lynn asks, when put in contact with, say, a person in business with experience, what is the best way to open dialogue, or how to relate? You want to expand communication without sounding like you just want to know them for the resources. Well, one good way to do it, Sherry Lynn, is to be honestly amicable and say, look, you're a person that I hold in high regard. I love what you're doing. I would love to find out more about it. Would you be open to a conversation? Just opening up that way, Sherry Lynn, that gives them the opportunity to share with you what they would like. It also it doesn't make you look like you're just seeking them out for their resources or their information. It shows that you have general interest. So when we talked earlier about be interested and be interesting, part of being interested in people is letting them know how much you value what they're doing. Now, I'm also not talking about kissing their butt or kissing up to them, anything like that. What I'm doing is giving them an honest outlook on the way you feel about them. If it's somebody you value, let them know you value them and you love to talk to them about some information to learn more. Asking people things in order for you to learn is a really, really good way for people to give you information. Most people are willing to teach or advise you on things. So I hope that helps. Okay. Jewel, thank you for being with us this evening. Jewel asks, when are puns inappropriate? It would depend on the pun, Jewel. So, um, if you're in the middle of a conversation and you feel the conversation has taken a more serious note, puns probably aren't that appropriate. If it's a little bit lighter, if the conversation's a little bit lighter, maybe puns would be appropriate in general. Now, the type of puns you're talking about, I have no idea. That would be in context. That would depend on what the conversation is about and what the pun is about, and if there is a match there. If there's no match between your pun and the conversation, then the answer would be no. Pun wouldn't be appropriate. Thank you for that. Okay. Kevin, thank you for joining us this evening. Kevin asks, how do you stay focused when everyone is talking over others at the same time? This is a tough one. And I already brought up to all of you before, my family, everybody's constantly talking over one another. Well, how do you stay focused when all that chaos is going on? One thing you could do, Kevin, is focus on the conversation that you're actually interested in and tune into that one. Now, if everybody's talking over everybody and it's constant back and forth and you can't follow, it's also okay to step in and say, listen, everybody, we're just talking over one another. I'm not understanding where this conversation is going. Could somebody share that with me? And that may help, or they just may continue to talk over each other. But when it's a mosh pit of just people talking over one another, it is really hard to focus. Normally, I would just choose somebody or choose a conversation within all that mess that's interesting and only focus on that. I hope that helps. Okay. Julie has another question. Julie, thank you. How should you handle a conversation where someone is not forthcoming and straightforward about where a relationship is going? Julie, that's a great question. This is really where, at the beginning, we talked about purposeful questioning. This is where those purposeful questions are very important. If somebody's not forthcoming and straightforward about where a relationship is going, you would need to ask very specific questions about what you really want to know and say, what I'm looking for is clarity here. I'm looking to be very clear about where this relationship is going, and here's what I'm asking. And then ask whatever questions you have. Just set the tone for that right away and let them know exactly what you're looking for. Now, if they don't give you that information, their response is up to them, but you could definitely ask very purposeful, meaningful questions in order to get the information you're looking for. Great question. Okay, and then it looks like we have one more question. Tracy, thank you for being with us. Tracy, I think you've been in a couple of my programs now, so thank you very much for returning. Tracy asks, pauses are okay, but how long is too long? Really good question. Now, the length of the pause may depend. However, normally between 2 to 4 seconds is pretty decent. Now, it's not the be all, the say all be all. Sometimes you may pause a little bit more. If it's something really deep that you need to think about, you can actually say, give me a few seconds here. I need to think about this. And it may be 10 seconds, 12 seconds, but normally anywhere 2 to 4 seconds is a decent pause. 4 to 7 seconds is a more impactful pause. So I hope that helps, Tracy. That's really good. Okay. All right. That looks like that was all the questions for this evening. So thank you very much. Here's all of my information. So feel free to follow me on my social channels. Feel free to send me a DM, anything, any comments, feedback, anything like that. I'm always open to it. If you scan this QR code takes you to my bio site, which you could download my information. You could go to any of my channels at any time. There's a couple resources on there as well for you. I really hoped you enjoy this evening, and I'm grateful to be with you all. I'm going to check the chat one last time. Okay, there was an additional question. How do you communicate with a poor listener? Now, this depends on your level of relationship, your level of courage, but here's what I would say. If you're communicating with a really poor listener, it's not a bad thing to appropriately point that out and let them know, listen, I need to let you know I feel like you're not listening to me, or I feel you're distracted, or I feel that, or I'm noticing that you might not be interested in the conversation. It's really good to just appropriately call those things out and get them on the table. I hope that helped. And that was Dale. Dale asked that. Okay. One last check, and I do believe, yep, that is it for the evening. Thank you all so much for being with me. I look forward to seeing you in a future room. Have a wonderful evening and all the best to everybody. Good night.